In June 1942, Washington's newly formed Office of Strategic Services, under Director William Donovan, faced a hidden war within the war. Tasked with dismantling Nazi spy networks threatening Allied plans across Western Europe, German Abwehr agents, embedded in France, relayed troop movements and supply routes to Berlin, risking exposure of the Normandy campaign. The Office of Strategic Services, with fewer than 13,000 personnel by 1944, stood against a vast Axis intelligence machine. Donovan's Counterintelligence Branch, X2, formed in 1943, wielded ultra, decrypts German communications, broken by Allied codebreakers to track spies with precision. The number that matters is 3,000 Axis agents, identified by X2 inches Spain by Victory in Europe Day, a metric of their relentless reach in neutral territory. In London's fog-shrouded offices, analysts pored over intercepted signals, mapping networks that could unravel D-Day's fragile momentum. Failure meant German divisions repositioning to crush Allied beachheads. Success promised a blinded enemy, misdirected by their own trusted operatives. X2 officers coordinated with British MI5's double-cross system, which controlled key double agents like Garbo to fix German reserves at Pas de Calais, while OSS protected ultra sources and neutralized Abwehr stay-behinds in France. Donovan dispatched teams to Iberian ports, where Spanish handlers funneled reports from occupied territories. These lines, if unbroken, fed Berlin's illusions of Allied weakness. Agents slipped across Pyrenees trails under moonless skies, their wireless sets humming false coordinates that echoed through Abwehr stations. British handlers scripted deceptions with meticulous detail, channeling them through turned spies whose transmissions mimicked desperation. American X2 men shadowed these efforts, vetting liaisons and sealing leaks that could betray the codebreaker's edge. As spring 1944 bloomed, Normandy's cliffs loomed in planners' minds. Every intercepted whisper tightened the noose on German expectations. Donovan's directives echoed in cable traffic. Exploit every fracture in enemy trust. X2's Iberian haul grew, cross-referencing Ultra with defector confessions to map Abwehr's continental web. The constraint was Spain's neutrality, binding agents to covert paths. French networks pulsed with urgency. A single, unchecked radio could summon panzer reserves to Omaha Beach. In Madrid's back alleys, OSS case officers met informants who traded dossiers for safe passage, their ledgers swelling with names and frequencies. British double-cross fed the grand illusion, but X2 ensured no rogue signal pierced the veil. Troops massed in southern England, their silhouettes deceiving Luftwaffe spotters. Below, deception cables flew to controlled assets. The Allies' gamble sharpened. One false step, and Hitler's gaze would pivot west. X2's files mounted, each entry a silenced threat. In Madrid's back alleys, OSS case officers met informants who traded dossiers for safe passage, their ledgers swelling with names and frequencies. British double-cross fed the grand illusion, but X2 ensured no rogue signal pierced the veil. Troops massed in southern England, their silhouettes deceiving Luftwaffe spotters. Below, deception cables flew to controlled assets. The Allies' gamble sharpened. One false step, and Hitler's gaze would pivot west. X2's files mounted, each entry a silenced threat. Summer 1943 cast long shadows over Lisbon's docks, where X2 operatives, dispatched from William Donovan's headquarters, hunted Abwehr agents funneling reports from France. Neutral Portugal buzzed with espionage. German operatives slipped through cafes, their coded messages detailing Allied convoys crossing the Atlantic. X2's counterstroke relied on ultra decrypts, which pinpointed radio signals from Lisbon to Berlin with chilling accuracy. By July 1943, Donovan's force of 13,000 personnel, lean against the Wehrmacht's millions, had trained its counterintelligence lens on Iberian networks. Spanish and Portuguese handlers, loyal to Berlin, relayed coastal sightings. X2 turned these channels against their masters. Operatives shadowed couriers through Lisbon's cobbled alleys, intercepting microfilms hidden in cigarette packets. Each capture tightened the noose, feeding names to London's MI5 for cross-referencing with double-cross assets. The constraint was time. Every hour risked an Abwehr signal exposing Allied deceptions. In Madrid, an OSS officer met a defector who surrendered a ledger naming 3,000 Axis agents across Spain by 1945, a haul built on relentless surveillance. Night after night, X2 teams decoded intercepts, their typewriters clacking in dim safehouses, mapping the enemy's reach. Across the channel, France's hedgerows hid Abwehr wireless sets, their operators whispering troop counts to German intelligence. X2's French section, bolstered by Ultra, tracked these signals from Normandy's beaches to Paris's outskirts. By August 1943, operatives arrested a courier near Caen, his satchel stuffed with cipher keys. Interrogations yielded frequencies. Controlled radios began transmitting lies by September. The cold line, one cipher broken daily under Ultra's lens. British MI5 orchestrated the grand deception, feeding false invasion plans through agents like Garbo, while X2 sealed the gaps. Donovan's men shadowed French collaborators, their movements betraying Abwehr safehouses in Rouen and Cherbourg. Each raid silenced a transmitter, starving Berlin of truth. In Spain, X2 leveraged defectors like Carl Eitel, who fled Lisbon in November 1943, exposing Juan Frutos, an Abwehr veteran embedded since 1935. Frutos, arrested in Cherbourg on July 8, 1944, resumed transmissions under X2 control, sending fabricated reports on Allied armor by July 25. These lies painted a fractured invasion, luring German reserves to phantom threats. OSS officers, fluent in German codes, crafted messages mimicking Abwehr syntax, their precision honed in Washington's training rooms. The human cost surfaced in Lisbon's safehouses, where X2's young lieutenants, some barely 25, wrestled with betrayal's weight. One officer, fluent in Spanish, met a double agent in a rain-soaked plaza, extracting names while dodging Gestapo watchers. His reports, filed by Midnight Oil, named handlers in Bilbao and Barcelona, each a thread in the Abwehr's web. By 1944, X2's Iberian Hall fed MI5's double-cross, ensuring no rogue signal betrayed the Pas de Calais ruse. The Cold Line, 3,000 agents tracked across Spain by 1945. Donovan's directives demanded precision. A single errant transmission could unravel months of deception. In France, X2 teams trailed Abwehr couriers through liberated villages, their bicycles weaving past bombed-out barns. Each arrest yielded codebooks, which OSS analysts cross-checked against Ultra intercepts. British handlers scripted radio plays, while X2 ensured no genuine signal pierced the fog. The number that matters is 13,000 OSS personnel. By 1944, a lean force outwitting a sprawling enemy. In Madrid, safehouse lamps burned late, as operatives sifted defector testimonies, their desks piled with decrypts and dossiers. In Berlin, Abwehr officers scanned Frutos's reports, their maps marking false Allied positions. German commanders, misled by controlled transmissions, held reserves at Pas de Calais, blind to Normandy's buildup. The adversary's view. Frutos's signals confirmed Allied weakness. Panzers stayed north, unmoved. This turning point, orchestrated by MI5 and sealed by X2, locked German eyes on a lie. The Cold Line. 15 agents controlled by spring 1945. X2's Spanish operations, feeding 3,000 agent names by Victory in Europe Day, crippled Abwehr's reach in neutral hubs. In France, operatives raided a Cherbourg safehouse on July 10, 1944, seizing a transmitter still warm from use. Its operator, under interrogation, named contacts in Brest, each a link in Berlin's chain. OSS teams, coordinating with French resistance, dismantled these cells by August, their silenced radios ensuring D-Day's momentum. Donovan's men, lean and relentless, worked in MI5's shadow, their ultra-driven raids starving German planners of clarity. As autumn 1944 deepened, X2's nets tightened across Western Europe. In Lisbon, a defector's confession exposed an Abwehr courier route through San Sebastian, where OSS operatives intercepted coded letters bound for Berlin. Each document, cross-referenced with Ultra, named agents still active in France. By December, X2 controlled transmissions from 5 French radios, each feeding lies about Patton's Third Army. These deceptions pinned German divisions, easing Allied thrusts toward the Rhine. In Spain, OSS officers met informants in smoky tabernas, trading gold for names that swelled their ledgers. The Iberian campaign, less heralded than Normandy's beaches, proved decisive. 3,000 Axis agents, tracked by 1945, marked X2's silent triumph. Donovan's 13,000-strong OSS, stretched across continents, outmaneuvered a foe reliant on fractured intelligence. British double-cross wove the grand illusion, but X2's raids ensured no truth slipped through. As winter loomed, German commanders fed false coordinates, deployed reserves to ghost threats, their maps useless. In Paris, liberated streets buzzed with Allied troops, while X2's safehouses hummed with decrypts, each a nail in the Abwehr's coffin. The war's tide turned, not on battlefields alone, but in the silent war of signals and shadows. As winter loomed, German commanders fed false coordinates, deployed reserves to ghost threats, their maps useless. In Paris, liberated streets buzzed with Allied troops, while X2's safehouses hummed with decrypts, each a nail in the Abwehr's coffin. The war's tide turned, not on battlefields alone, but in the silent war of signals and shadows. Autumn 1944 shifted X2's focus to Italy's fractured plains, where Abwehr agents, lingering among partisan shadows, relayed supply routes to Berlin through neutral couriers. Rome, secured after June 1944's advance, harbored stay-behind networks. These threads, if pulled, exposed Allied flanks in the Apennines. William Donovan's Office of Strategic Services, numbering 13,000 by 1944, directed its X2 branch to coordinate with British counterparts, leveraging ultra-decrypts to expose Abwehr traffic. James Jesus Angleton, a 26-year-old lieutenant, arrived in Rome in November 1944, assigned to Special Counterintelligence Unit Z to revitalize a unit stalled amid Italy's post-war ferment. His team, drawing on intercepts and field reports, pursued agents amid blurred alliances where former fascists traded loyalties for survival. The constraint was instability. Liberated zones teemed with informants whose motives shifted like mountain winds. Angleton's cultural ties to Italy, forged in youth, eased contacts with naval officers like Capitano di Fregata Carlo Recio, who, from November 1944, shared details on insurgent cells and holdout networks. In Genoa's shadowed ports, X2 teams intercepted Abwehr couriers, their satchels holding encoded dispatches on Allied convoys from Naples. By December 1944, Angleton's unit seized documents near Turin, their contents cross-checked against Ultra to reveal handler links. Intercepts and decrypts exposed Abwehr patterns. These seizures supported broader Allied efforts, denying Berlin glimpses of Mediterranean movements. Angleton's group, coordinating with British Section V, mapped networks extending to Iberian outposts. There, X2's efforts catalogued 3,000 Axis agents across Spain by 1945, a record amassed through persistent liaisons. Donovan's cables urged vigilance. Isolate every conduit to German ears. In Rome, Angleton conferred with Recio in guarded rooms, gleaning names from church-adjacent contacts wary of Vatican scrutiny. Each verified lead, drawn from Ultra, constricted Abwehr flows, leaving their planners adrift. Angleton's Plan, IV, initiated in January 1945 with Italian naval allies, surveilled the ex-mass network of ex-fascist operatives in the north. Teams trailed suspects along Milan's rail lines, their signals betraying ties to Berlin. By February, controlled assets disrupted transmissions, feeding selective deceptions to mislead German sweeps. The Cold Line. One network, fractured monthly through joint efforts. These actions aligned with MI5's deception frameworks, bolstering resistance without direct division shifts. In Spain, X2's Iberian logs reinforced the haul, 3,000 agents noted by Victory in Europe Day, a tally of guarded exchanges. Angleton, elevated to head all X2 inches Italy by March 1945, weighed informant risks, enlisting sources with divided pasts. His interrogation guides, drafted from January through April 1945, drew from prisoners of war to probe multiple hostile services. In Venice, a March raid yielded cipher materials, tracing Abwehr cells in the lagoon. Each find, validated by intercepts, muted threats to advancing columns. In Berlin, Abwehr reviewers sifted Italian dispatches, their charts plotting overstated partisan threats. German leaders, deceived by filtered reports, hesitated on redeployments. The adversary's view, XMAS feeds signaled scattered foes, units lingered, vulnerable. This pivot, shaped by Angleton's assets and British scripts, fixed eyes on fabrications. The Cold Line. multiple services probed by April 1945. Donovan's 13,000 personnel, dispersed globally, relied on X2's rigor to counter a disjointed rival. In Bari, operatives halted a courier on February 10, 1945, his load outlining port sabotage schemes, questioning revealed ties in Trieste, unraveled by ultra-cross references. Angleton's unit, linking with Special Operations Executive, redirected these channels, channeling benign data to Berlin. In Spain, defectors in Seville's quarters bartered passage for files that expanded records. The Iberian front, quieter than Normandy's roar, held weight. 3,000 Axis agents, documented by 1945, signaled X2's quiet gains. Donovan's agents, shadowing MI5's lead, guarded deception's edges. As spring 1945 unfolded, Italy's lines crept northward, tanks breaching Gothic defenses under partisan fire. X2 outposts crackled with signals, lamps flickering over reports. Angleton, 27 by then, directed sweeps silencing Abwehr outposts in the Po Valley, each quieted link, eroding German resolve. In Rome, Rezio's inputs flagged loyalist plots, preempted by coordinated patrols. Ultra's decrypt flow, merged with ground verifies, charted webs from Florence to the Adriatic. In Spain, OSS liaisons pursued routes via Gibraltar, their trails yielding no breaches. The number that matters is 13,000 OSS personnel by 1944, a compact array, outpacing a vast adversary. Angleton's protocols, shared across X2 posts, sharpened methods turning assets continent-wide. By April, surveilled lines in Italy disrupted 5 Abwehr feeds, each relaying curated illusions on troop flows. These measures, woven into Allied veils, eased pushes toward Milan. In Barcelona, a March confession unveiled a San Sebastian path, its bearers netted by teams. Each paper, sifted through Ultra, listed operatives lingering in Lombardy. X2's Italian push, overshadowed by French headlines, carried force. Managed channels kept Berlin's commands astray. As May 1945 approached, German officers fed skewed bearings, stationed forces against specters, their grids obsolete. In Naples, Angleton's base thrummed with wires, each dispatch hammering the Abwehr's frame. The conflict's surge owed debts, not just to fronts, but to the hushed clash of ciphers and trails. As May 1945 approached, German officers fed skewed bearings, stationed forces against specters, their grids obsolete. In Naples, Angleton's base thrummed with wires, each dispatch hammering the Abwehr's frame. The conflict's surge owed debts not just to fronts, but to the hushed clash of ciphers and trails. Spring 1945 saw X2's campaign crest, its operatives weaving a web across Europe to choke the Abwehr's last gasps. From Lisbon to Trieste, William Donovan's Office of Strategic Services, with 13,000 personnel by 1944, synchronized with British MI5 to blind German intelligence. Ultra decrypts, flowing from Bletchley's machines, exposed Abwehr signals in France's northern ports and Italy's Alpine passes. In Cherbourg, X2 teams, guided by intercepts, raided a safe house on April 6, 1945, capturing Jean Senuke, a radio operator tied to the I-Marine network. His handler, Friedrich Kaulen, betrayed by documents seized near the Gironde River, fed Berlin false naval data through controlled channels. These deceptions, crafted with British double-cross, held German coastal defenses at illusory points. The constraint was speed. Each unchecked signal risked alerting Berlin to Allied thrusts. In Spain, X2's ledger grew, cataloging 3,000 Axis agents by Victory in Europe Day, a tally built on covert trades in Madrid's fog-lit corners. In Paris, liberated but tense, OSS officers shadowed Abwehr couriers through crowded markets, their coded notes detailing Patton's Third Army movements. By March 1945, X2 intercepted a dispatch near Reims, its contents revealing a handler in Lille. Interrogations, cross-referenced with Ultra, exposed frequencies, controlled radios, began transmitting lies by April 10th. The cold line, one frequency, seized weekly through field precision. These efforts, aligned with MI5 scripts, painted a fractured Allied front, luring German reserves to phantom choke points. Donovan's men, lean and relentless, coordinated with French resistance to silence rogue sets in Normandy's hedgerows. In Lisbon, operatives met a defector on March 20th, 1945, his satchel yielding names linked to Spanish ports. Each lead, verified by decrypts, tightened the grip on Abwehr's lifelines, leaving their planners grasping at shadows. The number that matters is 13,000 OSS personnel by 1944, a compact force unraveling a sprawling foe. Across the Mediterranean, James Jesus Angleton's X2 unit in Italy pressed its advantage, targeting Abwehr outposts in the Veneto. In Verona, a raid on April 3, 1945, seized a transmitter relaying partisan coordinates to Berlin. Its operator, under pressure, named contacts in Padua, each a thread in the X-Mass network. The Cold Line, 5 channels, redirected by April 1945. Angleton's team, using Plan IVY protocols, fed Berlin exaggerated partisan strengths, misdirecting German sweeps into partisan traps. These actions, woven into British deception plans, eased Allied pushes toward the Po River. In Spain, X2's Iberian efforts reinforced the campaign, tracking 3,000 agents by 1945, a record of silent vigilance. Angleton's interrogations, guided by manuals drafted through April, probed multiple hostile services, yielding names from prisoners of war. In Milan, a courier's capture on April 15th exposed a Trieste cell, its ciphers decoded to reveal Abwehr's final Mediterranean threads. Each raid, grounded in ultra, muted a signal threatening Allied flanks. In Berlin, Abwehr officers scanned skewed reports, their maps plotting fictitious Allied weaknesses. German generals, misled, held divisions against imagined threats. The adversary's view, falsified signals showed stalled advances, panzers idled, exposed. This climax, shaped by X2's controls and MI5's orchestration, broke German foresight. The Cold Line, 15 assets managed by May 1945. Donovan's 13,000-strong OSS, stretched thin, leaned on X2's rigor to outmaneuver a crumbling enemy. In France, operatives raided a Rouen safehouse on April 12, 1945, seizing a radio still warm from use. Its operator named handlers in Brest, each link severed by coordinated sweeps. Angleton's Italian teams, paralleling these efforts, silenced sets in Bologna, their false transmissions pinning German units. In Spain, OSS officers met informants in Bilbao's shadowed tabernas, trading passage for dossiers that swelled their haul. The Iberian front, less heralded than battlefield victories, proved pivotal. 3,000 Axis agents, catalogued by 1945, marked X2's reach. British double-cross drove the deception's core, but X2's raids ensured no truth slipped through. As April 1945 waned, Allied armies surged across the Rhine, their treads grinding German defenses to dust. X2's safehouses, from Lisbon to Rome, buzzed with cables, their typewriters charting the Abwehr's collapse. In Paris, operatives trailed a courier through Montmartre's alleys, his microfilm betraying a Calais network. Interrogations, paired with ultra, redirected its signals by April 20th, feeding lies about coastal landings. In Italy, Angleton's unit raided a Venice outpost on April 25th, capturing ciphers that named Abwehr stragglers. Each find, cross-checked with decrypts, sealed a gap in Allied security. Donovan's orders, sharp and unyielding, demanded every German ear be deafened. In Spain, a defector's confession on April 10th exposed a Barcelona route, its couriers netted by OSS teams. The number that matters is 13,000 OSS personnel. By 1944, a lean array dismantling a vast adversary. X2's coordination with MI5, Special Operations Executive, and French resistance ensured no rogue signal pierced the veil. In Cherbourg, a final raid on April 30th silenced a transmitter, its operator confessing to links in Hamburg. These efforts, woven into the broader deception, kept German commands chasing ghosts. As May dawned, Berlin's intelligence crumbled, its officers blind to the noose tightening around their Reich. In Rome, Angleton's desk overflowed with decrypts, each a nail in the Abwehr's coffin. The war's end loomed, driven not by guns alone, but by the silent severing of signals and trust. As May dawned, Berlin's intelligence crumbled, its officers blind to the noose tightening around their Reich. In Rome, Angleton's desk overflowed with decrypts, each a nail in the Abwehr's coffin. The war's end loomed, driven not by guns alone, but by the silent severing of signals and trust. May 1945 cast a stark light on Europe's shattered fields, where X-2 operatives delivered the Abwehr's final blow. William Donovan's Office of Strategic Services, with 13,000 personnel by 1944, had woven a web from Lisbon to Venice, strangling German espionage. Ultra decrypts, paired with field intercepts, exposed the last Abwehr signals in France's coastal towns and Italy's northern valleys. In Brest, X-2 teams raided a safe house on May 3, 1945, seizing a transmitter relaying false Allied retreat signals. Its operator, under interrogation, named a handler in Antwerp, whose capture silenced a North Sea network. British MI5's double-cross system, feeding lies through agents like Garbo, held German reserves at bay, while X-2 sealed every crack. The constraint was endurance. Operatives, stretched thin, raced against Berlin's desperate countermeasures. In Spain, X-2's ledger closed with 3,000 Axis agents catalogued by Victory in Europe Day, a testament to relentless pursuit in neutral shadows. In Brussels, OSS officers trailed a courier through cobbled streets, his coded notes detailing phantom Allied supply drops. By May 5, 1945, intercepts and ULTRA exposed his frequency. Controlled transmissions began the next day, misdirecting German stragglers. The Cold Line, one network, dismantled weekly through coordinated sweeps. These efforts, synchronized with British deception, ensured no truth reached Berlin's collapsing command. Donovan's men, lean and precise, worked with Dutch resistance to silence radios in Rotterdam's docks. In Madrid, a defectors' meeting on May 2nd yielded a final dossier, naming Abwehr contacts in Lisbon. Each lead, verified by decrypts, ended a channel feeding German hopes. The number that matters is 13,000 OSS personnel by 1944, a compact force outwitting a broken enemy. James Jesus Angleton's Italian unit, now commanding X-2's regional efforts, raided a Trieste safehouse on May 4th, capturing ciphers tied to Alpine holdouts. Each find, cross-checked with Ultra, buried another Abwehr thread. Angleton's protocols, refined through months of interrogations, shaped X-2's final push across Europe. In Milan, operatives seized a courier on May 6, 1945, his satchel revealing plans for sabotage in liberated ports. The Cold Line, 5 channels, silenced by May 1945. These captures, aligned with MI5 scripts, fed Berlin tales of Allied disarray, locking German units in futile deployments. In Spain, X-2's Iberian efforts, tracking 3,000 agents by 1945, ensured no signal, pierced the Allied veil. Angleton's team, coordinating with Special Operations Executive, redirected Italian radios to mislead German remnants. In Florence, a raid on May 7th netted a codebook, exposing a Venetian cell still active post-surrender. Each operation, grounded in Ultra, erased threats to Allied consolidation. Donovan's cables, sharp and unyielding, urged operatives to sever Berlin's last eyes. In Berlin, Abwehr remnants sifted through final reports, their maps cluttered with false coordinates. German holdouts, misled, clung to imagined strongholds. The adversary's view, skewed signals predicted Allied pauses. Troops waited, isolated. This collapse, driven by X-2's precision and MI5's deception, ended German intelligence. The Cold Line, 15 assets controlled by May 1945. Donovan's 13,000-strong OSS, battered but resolute, dismantled a foe undone by its own trust. In Lisbon, operatives met a final informant on May 8th, his testimony closing Spain's ledger at 3,000 agents tracked. In France, X-2 silenced a Calais radio on May 9th, its operator confessing to Hamburg links. These sweeps, paired with resistance efforts, ensured no rogue signal survived Germany's fall. Angleton's Italian base, humming with cables, catalogued the Abwehr's ruin. His methods, honed in Rome's chaos, seeded techniques for post-war intelligence. As Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, X-2 safehouses fell silent, their mission complete. The OSS, dissolved by October 1945, saw its 13,000 personnel scatter, but X-2's veterans carried their craft forward. Angleton joined the Central Intelligence Group, precursor to the Central Intelligence Agency, shaping counterintelligence with ultras lessons. In Spain, the Ledger of 3,000 Agents, finalized by Victory in Europe Day, stood as a monument to X2's reach. British double-cross had scripted the grand illusion, but X2's raids ensured its seamlessness. Across Europe, silenced radios and captured ciphers marked a war won in shadows. Donovan's vision, executed through lean teams, outlasted the Reich's collapse. In Washington, files from Lisbon to Rome filled archives, their pages mapping a silent triumph. The conflict's end, sealed by tanks and treaties, owed a debt to the unseen severing of trust. The conflict's end, sealed by tanks and treaties, owed a debt to the unseen severing of trust. October 1, 1945 marked the Office of Strategic Services dissolution, its 13,000 personnel scattering as Washington reshaped its intelligence architecture. X2's counterintelligence functions transferred to the Strategic Services Unit under the War Department, a bridge organization preserving clandestine capabilities amid post-war shifts. By mid-1946, these assets moved to the Central Intelligence Group, precursor to the Central Intelligence Agency, established in 1947. James Jesus Angleton, 28 by then, and stationed in Rome from late 1944, carried forward lessons from wartime signals intelligence support, liaison networks, and double-agent controls into this evolving framework. The Abwehr's collapse, shaped by X2 efforts alongside British deception and battlefield advances, left records from Lisbon to Rome as guides for new threats. In Spain, X2's registry of 3,000 Axis agents, finalized by Victory in Europe Day, served as a model for mapping covert networks in neutral territories. The constraint was adaptation. Wartime methods required refinement for peacetime uncertainties. Angleton's Italian liaisons, once aimed at fascist remnants, now informed protocols against Soviet expansions in divided Europe. His wartime manuals, circulated through 1945, influenced interrogations that probed emerging hostile services. In Washington, former X2 officers reviewed archived cables, their desks stacked with summaries of turned agents and disrupted signals. By 1946, the Strategic Services Unit integrated signals intelligence lessons from wartime intercepts, laying groundwork for Central Intelligence Group operations. The number that matters is 13,000 OSS personnel. By 1944, a lean cadre whose practices endured beyond its dissolution. Angleton, building ties with European counterparts in Rome, echoed wartime coordination with MI5 to address communist infiltrations in post-war capitals. These networks, rooted in Italy's recovery, countered Soviet agents in Berlin's sectors. The Cold Line, liaison protocols established quarterly through 1946. In Madrid, X2's Spain registry of 3,000 agents, cross-referenced in archived files, shaped early post-war surveillance of clandestine routes. X2 veterans, versed in deception's mechanics, ensured wartime experiences informed nascent counterintelligence practices. Their outposts, quiet after May 1945, now drafted plans for a shadow contest with Moscow's services. Across Europe, X2's influence embedded in the Central Intelligence Agency's counterintelligence framework by 1947. Drawing on double-agent tactics refined against the Abwehr, Angleton, ascending to head this staff by 1954, adapted liaison methods honed in Italy's chaos. In London, OSS alumni conferred with British services, sharing techniques that thwarted Soviet penetrations in Vienna's shadows. The Cold Line, counterintelligence networks linked yearly by 1947. These initiatives, informed by X2's Iberian registry of 3,000 agents, guarded against KGB efforts in Western embassies. Donovan's vision, realized through 13,000 personnel, molded intelligence for a divided world. In Paris, wartime records guided liaison exchanges, supporting efforts to counter Soviet deceptions echoing Abwehr patterns. Each collaboration, built on intercept lessons, shielded alliances from early breaches. The Soviet view, Western defenses appeared fragmented, agents encountered veiled obstacles. This transition, grounded in X2's wartime rigor, complicated Moscow's initial advances. The Cold Line, double agent, controls refined by 1947, Angleton's approaches, drawn from Italian operations, entered agency doctrine, fortifying against betrayals in Europe's fragile order. As 1947 progressed, the Central Intelligence Agency's counterintelligence practices solidified, traceable to X2's contributions in liaison and asset handling. In Rome, Angleton's contacts with Italian services, developed during 1945, addressed communist activities in Milan's industrial zones. His interrogation techniques, evolved from wartime captives, aided in vetting sources amid Vienna's exchanges by 1948. In Spain, X2's registry of 3,000 agents, documented by Victory in Europe Day, informed monitoring of ports once used by Abwehr couriers. These archives, combined with British insights, tracked Soviet movements through Gibraltar's Straits. Donovan's 13,000-strong OSS, disbanded yet enduring, provided a scaffold for this new era. In Washington, X2 alumni compiled guides for agent evaluation, their contents reflecting sweeps in Cherbourg and Bologna. Each method, validated against the Abwehr, now addressed KGB maneuvers. The war's closure ended one rivalry, but X2's legacy equipped the West for another, sustaining safeguards in a tense peace. In Berlin, agency officers, schooled in OSS disciplines, sifted Soviet signals, their lamps casting long shadows over reports. The quiet contest, sparked in Europe's ruins, now upheld a world balanced on guarded secrets. The quiet contest, sparked in Europe's ruins, now upheld a world balanced on guarded secrets. By 1948, the Central Intelligence Agency's counterintelligence framework, rooted in X2's wartime craft, stood firm against Soviet encroachments. James Jesus Angleton, leveraging lessons from Rome's 1945 operations, shaped agency methods to counter KGB penetrations across divided Europe. The Office of Strategic Services, with 13,000 personnel by 1944, had dissolved, but its X2 veterans carried forward liaison networks and double-agent tactics. In Spain, their registry of 3,000 Axis agents by Victory in Europe Day informed post-war surveillance of Soviet routes through neutral hubs. The constraint was vigilance. New threats demanded old rigor in untested arenas. Angleton's protocols, honed against the Abwehr, guided interrogations in Berlin's shadowed sectors, thwarting communist cells by 1949. In Washington, former X2 officers refined agency doctrine, their files echoing raids from Lisbon to Milan. Signals intelligence lessons, drawn from wartime intercepts, fortified defenses against Soviet ciphers. The Cold Line, one liaison network, strengthened yearly by 1948. These efforts, built on X2's Iberian ledger of 3,000 agents, tracked KGB couriers in Vienna's alleys. Donovan's vision, executed through 13,000 personnel, outlasted its wartime shell, embedding precision in a new intelligence age. In London, CIA teams, schooled in OSS methods, collaborated with MI5 to counter Soviet deceptions, their cables reflecting X2's silent triumphs. The number that matters is 13,000 OSS personnel. By 1944, a lean force shaping a guarded peace. From Rome to Berlin, X2's legacy endured, its techniques anchoring the West against a restless rival. The silent war, born in Europe's chaos, now sustained a world's fragile balance.